You wake up on a Tuesday morning in Manhattan to complete darkness. The digital clock beside your bed shows nothing. Your phone screen remains black despite repeated attempts to power it on. Outside your 23rd floor window, the city that never sleeps lies silent and dark as far as you can see. No street lights illuminate the avenues below. No traffic signals blink their familiar patterns. No neon signs advertise restaurants or stores. The greatest metropolis on Earth has been plunged into absolute darkness, and this is only the beginning of 30 days that will transform 8 million New Yorkers into survivors of the most challenging urban crisis in modern history. The first moments of complete power loss create confusion rather than panic as residents across all 5 boroughs attempt to understand what happened to their electrical infrastructure. In a studio apartment on the Upper East Side, marketing executive Sarah Chin reaches for her phone to check social media for outage information, forgetting momentarily that cellular towers require electricity to function. Her neighbors in the adjacent apartments make similar attempts to understand the scope of the blackout through devices that no longer connect to networks that no longer exist. The silence proves as unsettling as the darkness. New York City generates a constant background hum from air conditioning units, refrigerators, traffic lights, subway trains, and thousands of other electrical devices that provide the acoustic landscape of urban life. Without electricity, the city falls silent except for human voices calling to each other across courtyards and through apartment walls, asking questions that no one can answer about when power might return. Michael Rodriguez stands on his fire escape in Brooklyn, looking across the East River toward Manhattan where the famous skyline appears as dark silhouettes against the dawn sky. The Chrysler Building, Empire State Building, and One World Trade Center stand like monuments to a technological civilization that suddenly stopped functioning. No lights twinkle in apartment windows. No electronic billboards advertise products. No construction cranes move materials for ongoing building projects. The city appears frozen in time, waiting for electrical current that may not return for weeks. The subway system shuts down completely within minutes of the power failure as trains lose propulsion and station lighting systems fail simultaneously. Thousands of morning commuters find themselves trapped in underground tunnels between stations, surrounded by absolute darkness that creates claustrophobic panic among passengers who realize they must walk through subway tunnels to reach surface streets. Emergency lighting systems provide minimal illumination for approximately 30 minutes before backup batteries drain completely. Transit worker James Thompson guides passengers through the tunnel between 14th Street and Union Square stations, using a flashlight that represents one of the few functioning light sources in the entire subway system. The passengers move slowly through darkness that seems to swallow the flashlight beam, feeling along tunnel walls while stepping carefully around the electrified third rail that no longer carries current but remains a psychological barrier for people unaccustomed to walking on subway tracks. The emergency evacuation reveals the subway system's complete dependence on electrical power for basic operations. Ventilation fans stop circulating air through underground spaces. Water pumps cease removing moisture that constantly seeps into tunnel systems. Communication systems fail as dispatchers lose contact with trains throughout the network. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority faces the reality that their entire infrastructure becomes unusable without electricity, stranding millions of daily riders who depend on public transportation. Hospitals across the city activate emergency protocols designed for temporary power outages, but their backup systems are engineered for short-term electrical failures rather than extended blackouts. Mount Sinai Hospital's emergency generators provide power for approximately 72 hours under normal operating conditions, but the complete failure of the electrical grid means that fuel deliveries for generator operation become impossible when gas stations cannot pump fuel and delivery trucks cannot navigate streets without traffic signals. Dr. Amanda Walsh coordinates emergency procedures in Mount Sinai's emergency department as the hospital staff realizes that their backup power will not sustain operations indefinitely. Critical care equipment that keeps patients alive requires constant electrical supply. Surgical procedures become impossible without reliable lighting and electronic monitoring equipment. The hospital's pharmacy cannot maintain refrigeration for medications that require temperature control. Medical facilities across the city face similar challenges as they attempt to provide healthcare without the electrical infrastructure that modern medicine requires. The hospital staff develops triage protocols for determining which patients can survive without electrical life support and which medical procedures are essential enough to justify using limited generator power. Doctors make decisions about disconnecting patients from ventilators and other electrical devices, knowing that the hospital cannot maintain power indefinitely. The moral complexity of these decisions creates psychological trauma for medical professionals who entered healthcare to save lives but must now choose which lives they can feasibly support. Emergency services discover that their communication systems, dispatch operations, and response capabilities depend entirely on electrical infrastructure that no longer functions. 911 call centers lose their ability to receive emergency calls when telephone networks fail. Police precincts cannot coordinate patrols or respond to incidents when radio systems stop working. Fire departments face the double challenge of responding to emergencies without communication systems while fighting fires that may spread unchecked due to non-functioning fire suppression systems in buildings. Police officer Maria Santos attempts to coordinate emergency response in her precinct without radio contact with patrol cars or other precincts. The police station operates on backup generator power that will last approximately 48 hours, but officers realize that law enforcement becomes nearly impossible when they cannot communicate with each other or receive reports about crimes and emergencies occurring throughout their jurisdiction. The breakdown of communication systems transforms routine police work into isolated individual efforts by officers who must rely on direct observation rather than coordinated response. The fire department faces particularly severe challenges as building fire suppression systems, water pumps, and emergency lighting all depend on electrical power. Firefighter David Kim responds to a high-rise apartment fire where the building's sprinkler system cannot function without electricity to operate water pumps. Fire alarms remain silent as residents sleep unaware of growing danger. Elevators trap residents on upper floors as firefighters must carry equipment up 20 or 30 flights of stairs to reach fires that spread unchecked through buildings designed with electrical fire suppression systems. The water supply system begins failing within hours as electric pumps that maintain water pressure throughout the city's distribution network stop operating. Water towers on building rooftops provide temporary supplies through gravity flow, but these reserves drain quickly when pumping stations cannot refill the system. Residents in high-rise buildings discover that water pressure decreases from top floors downward as the system loses the electrical pumping that forces water to upper elevations. Sarah Chun fills every available container in her 23rd floor apartment with water while pressure remains sufficient to reach her elevation. She realizes that her building's water supply depends entirely on electric pumps that push water from street level to rooftop tanks that serve upper floors. Without electricity, gravity becomes the only force moving water through the building's plumbing, and gravity cannot lift water 23 floors above street level. The city's sewage treatment facilities shut down completely as their operations require massive electrical power for pumps, aerators, and processing equipment. Raw sewage begins backing up through the system as pumping stations cannot move waste through the treatment process. Storm drains and sewer systems designed to handle waste removal through electrical pumping become sources of contamination when untreated sewage cannot be processed or transported away from populated areas. Public health officials recognize that sanitation represents one of the most immediate threats to public safety as toilet facilities in high-rise buildings stop functioning when sewage cannot be pumped away from lower levels. The accumulation of human waste in densely populated areas creates disease risks that compound the other challenges of extended power failure. Traditional public health infrastructure proves completely dependent on electrical systems for waste management, water treatment, and disease prevention. Food distribution networks collapse immediately as refrigeration systems fail throughout the supply chain from warehouses to grocery stores to restaurants. Supermarkets face the immediate loss of all frozen and refrigerated products that represent significant portions of their inventory. Restaurant walk-in coolers and freezers lose temperature control, forcing establishments to discard perishable ingredients that cannot be preserved without electrical refrigeration. Grocery store manager Robert Chong attempts to coordinate food distribution at his Midtown location as he realizes that electronic point-of-sale systems cannot process purchases and cash registers cannot calculate transactions without electricity. The store's inventory management system fails as barcode scanners and computerized tracking systems stop functioning. Customers gather outside the store with cash, hoping to purchase non-perishable foods, but the store cannot conduct business when it cannot determine prices, process payments, or track inventory. The breakdown of commercial food systems forces New Yorkers to develop alternative approaches to obtaining and preserving food without electrical refrigeration. Residents organize neighborhood food sharing where multiple families combine their perishable foods to consume them before spoilage occurs. Rooftop gardens and urban farming initiatives that seemed like novelties before the blackout become essential food sources as people realize that local food production provides security when distribution networks fail. Community kitchens emerge in apartment buildings and neighborhoods where residents pool their resources to cook food over open flames and gas stoves that function independently of electrical systems. These cooperative cooking arrangements prevent food waste while creating social gatherings that help maintain community morale during the crisis. Former restaurant workers apply their culinary skills to preparing large quantities of food for community consumption using available ingredients and non-electrical cooking methods. Transportation throughout the city becomes limited to walking and bicycles as traffic signals fail and gasoline pumps cannot operate without electricity. The absence of traffic lights creates dangerous intersections where vehicles attempt to navigate without signal coordination. Most drivers abandon their cars within hours as they realize that fuel cannot be obtained and traffic cannot move safely through streets without electrical signal systems. The bicycle revolution begins as New Yorkers realize that human-powered transportation remains functional when mechanical transport fails. Bike share programs that operated through electronic payment systems become inaccessible, but private bicycle ownership proves invaluable for residents who need to travel distances too far for walking. Bicycle repair shops operating with hand tools and mechanical knowledge become essential businesses as bikes represent the primary remaining transportation option. Pedestrian traffic increases dramatically as walking becomes the only reliable method of transportation for most residents. The city's sidewalks, designed to accommodate normal foot traffic alongside vehicular transportation, become overwhelmed with pedestrians traveling distances they previously covered by subway or taxi. Walking from Brooklyn to Manhattan or from the Bronx to Midtown becomes multi-hour journeys that people undertake for essential business when no other transportation options exist. The communication breakdown proves psychologically devastating as residents lose contact with family members, employers, and friends throughout the metropolitan area. Cell phone towers require electrical power to operate, making wireless communication impossible. Landline telephone systems fail when switching stations lose power. Internet services disappear as data centers and network infrastructure require continuous electrical supply. Amateur radio operators emerge as one of the few functioning communication networks as their battery-powered and solar-powered equipment continues operating when commercial communication systems fail. Ham radio enthusiasts coordinate emergency information, relay messages between separated family members, and maintain contact with authorities outside the affected area. These hobbyist radio networks become lifelines for communities that otherwise face complete communication isolation. The psychological impact intensifies as residents realize that they cannot contact relatives outside New York City to inform them about their safety or request assistance. Parents cannot reach children who attend school in different boroughs. Employers cannot contact employees to coordinate business continuity plans. The social fabric that holds urban communities together through electronic communication begins fraying as people lose touch with their extended networks of family, friends, and colleagues. News and information become scarce commodities as television broadcasts cease, radio stations stop transmitting, and internet news sources become inaccessible. Battery-powered radios provide limited information from stations outside the affected area, but these broadcasts focus on the regional scope of the blackout rather than specific information about conditions within New York City neighborhoods. Residents develop informal information networks through word-of-mouth communication and handwritten notices posted in public spaces. The first night brings temperatures that reveal how much New Yorkers depend on electrical heating and cooling systems for basic comfort and survival. Air conditioning systems that make summer heat bearable shut down completely. Electric heating systems fail to provide warmth during cool weather. Residents wearing multiple layers of clothing discover that their apartments become uncomfortable or dangerous without climate control systems they previously took for granted. Building management systems fail throughout the city as elevators stop operating, ventilation systems cease circulating air, and fire suppression systems become non-functional. High-rise apartment buildings designed for electrical operation become difficult and dangerous to inhabit when basic building systems fail. Residents living on upper floors face the daily challenge of climbing numerous flights of stairs to reach their apartments while carrying water and supplies that cannot be delivered through normal building services. Elderly residents and people with mobility limitations face particular hardship as they cannot navigate high-rise buildings without elevator service. Mrs. Dorothy Williams, an 82-year-old widow living on the 14th floor of a Lower East Side apartment building, becomes effectively trapped in her apartment when she cannot climb 14 flights of stairs repeatedly to obtain food and water from street level. Her situation represents thousands of vulnerable residents who depend on electrical building systems for basic mobility and access to essential services. Financial systems collapse completely as banks cannot operate without computers, credit card processing fails, and ATM machines become inoperable. The economy reverts to cash-only transactions, but most businesses cannot conduct sales when they cannot calculate totals, process payments, or provide change without electrical cash register systems. Economic activity slows dramatically as the infrastructure supporting commercial transactions disappears overnight. Bank branches close immediately when their computer systems, security systems, and communication networks fail simultaneously. Customers cannot access account information, withdraw funds, or conduct any banking transactions when the electronic infrastructure supporting modern finance becomes non-functional. Safety deposit boxes remain inaccessible as electronic lock systems cannot operate and bank security systems cannot verify customer identities without computer access. The stock exchanges shut down completely as electronic trading systems require continuous electrical power and network connectivity. Wall Street, the financial center of global capitalism, becomes silent and dark as trading floors that operate through sophisticated computer systems cannot function without electricity. Financial professionals accustomed to managing billions of dollars in electronic transactions find themselves unable to conduct any business when the technological infrastructure supporting modern finance disappears. Small businesses adapt more quickly to cash-only operations than large retailers with complex electronic systems. Corner stores and restaurants with simple cash registers or manual calculation systems continue serving customers who pay with paper money and coins. These establishments become community anchors as they provide essential goods and services when larger businesses with electronic dependencies cannot operate. Crime rates fluctuate unpredictably as the breakdown of electrical systems affects both criminal activity and law enforcement capabilities. The failure of security systems, street lighting, and communication networks creates opportunities for criminal activity, but the economic breakdown also reduces some motivations for property crime when electronic devices and credit cards become worthless without electrical infrastructure to support their operation. Looting begins in some commercial areas as desperate residents attempt to obtain food, water, and essential supplies from stores that cannot conduct normal business operations. The breakdown of payment systems and inventory control creates situations where people take goods without payment, not necessarily from criminal intent but from necessity when normal commercial transactions become impossible. Store owners face difficult decisions about protecting inventory when police cannot respond to security calls and alarm systems cannot function. However, community cooperation emerges alongside criminal activity as neighbors organize mutual aid and protection networks. Apartment buildings develop informal security systems where residents take turns monitoring common areas and coordinating assistance for vulnerable residents. Neighborhood watch groups patrol streets using flashlights and lanterns to maintain safety when police patrols become limited and street lighting disappears. The mental health impact becomes evident within days as residents struggle with anxiety, depression, and trauma related to the complete breakdown of urban systems they depend on for survival. The combination of darkness, isolation, uncertainty, and daily hardship creates psychological stress that affects entire communities. Mental health professionals lose the ability to provide services when they cannot contact clients, and their offices cannot operate without electrical systems. Support groups form spontaneously in apartment buildings and community centers as people gather to share experiences and coping strategies for surviving extended power failure. These informal therapy sessions provide psychological relief through human connection when professional mental health services become unavailable. Residents discover that community support and shared problem-solving help maintain mental health during circumstances that would overwhelm individuals attempting to cope alone. Religious communities adapt their services to candlelight worship and prayer meetings that provide spiritual comfort and community connection during the crisis. Churches, synagogues, mosques, and other religious institutions become community centers where people gather for fellowship, mutual aid, and collective action. Religious leaders organize food distribution, coordinate care for vulnerable residents, and provide counseling services that help people find meaning and hope during seemingly hopeless circumstances. The education system shuts down completely as schools cannot operate without electrical lighting, heating, cooling, and communication systems. Public schools close indefinitely when they cannot provide safe learning environments or contact parents about educational alternatives. Teachers organize informal neighborhood learning groups where children receive instruction through verbal lessons and activities that don't require electrical equipment. Parents struggle to maintain educational routines for children who cannot attend school or complete homework assignments that require electronic devices or internet access. Family education becomes essential as parents take responsibility for teaching children academic subjects alongside practical skills needed for survival without electrical conveniences. Children adapt more quickly than adults to conditions that require creativity, physical activity, and social cooperation rather than electronic entertainment and digital learning. Healthcare challenges intensify beyond hospital operations as pharmacies cannot maintain refrigeration for medications, medical devices fail without electrical power, and patients with chronic conditions cannot access the treatments they need to maintain health. Diabetics face life-threatening situations when insulin requires refrigeration that pharmacies cannot provide. People using medical devices like oxygen concentrators or sleep apnea machines discover that their health depends on electrical equipment that no longer functions. Alternative medicine and traditional healing methods gain renewed importance as electrical medical technology becomes unavailable. Herbal medicine, acupuncture, massage therapy, and other non-electrical healing approaches provide treatment options when conventional medicine becomes inaccessible. Medical professionals with knowledge of pre-electrical medical techniques apply historical treatment methods that functioned before hospitals depended on sophisticated electronic equipment. The water crisis deepens as building water systems drain completely and residents face severe dehydration risks. People develop water collection systems using rain collection, condensation recovery, and conservation methods that stretch limited supplies. The Hudson River and East River become sources of water that requires boiling for purification, but many residents lack the fuel and equipment necessary for water treatment. Community water distribution emerges as neighborhood groups organize systems for sharing and conserving available water supplies. Residents with access to functioning wells or natural water sources coordinate distribution to apartment buildings and areas with no water access. These sharing networks prevent dehydration deaths while creating interdependent relationships that strengthen community bonds during the crisis. Sanitation becomes a major health hazard as sewage systems back up and waste accumulation threatens public health throughout densely populated areas. Buildings develop alternative waste management systems using composting toilets, waste burial, and sanitation practices that prevent disease outbreaks. Public health knowledge that seemed obsolete in modern urban environments becomes essential for preventing cholera, dysentery, and other diseases associated with poor sanitation. Community sanitation committees organize waste management for apartment buildings and neighborhoods when municipal services cannot operate. These volunteer groups coordinate waste disposal, maintain community latrines, and enforce sanitation practices that prevent disease transmission. The committees apply principles of community health organization that urban residents had never previously needed to implement. Food production begins in earnest as residents recognize that commercial food distribution may not resume quickly enough to prevent starvation. Rooftop gardens expand rapidly as people plant vegetables in containers, window boxes, and any available soil. Community gardens in parks and vacant lots become intensive food production areas where neighborhoods coordinate agricultural work and share harvest yields. Urban foraging becomes a survival skill as residents learn to identify edible plants growing in parks, vacant lots, and landscaped areas throughout the city. Dandelions, wild onions, and other edible plants provide nutrition when commercial food becomes unavailable. Former park rangers and nature enthusiasts teach foraging skills to neighbors who need to supplement their food supplies with local wild plants. Fishing in the Hudson River, East River, and harbor areas provides protein sources for communities with access to waterfront areas. Residents construct fishing equipment from available materials and coordinate fishing expeditions that supply fresh food for neighborhood consumption. These fishing activities create recreational opportunities alongside nutritional benefits, helping maintain morale during difficult circumstances. The clothing and textile situation becomes problematic as laundry facilities fail and residents cannot maintain hygiene and clothing cleanliness without washing machines and electric dryers. Hand-washing clothing in available water becomes a time-consuming daily chore that requires coordination among apartment building residents who share limited water supplies. Clotheslines and air drying replace electrical laundry systems throughout the city. Sewing and clothing repair become essential skills as residents cannot replace damaged clothing through normal retail shopping when stores cannot operate. People with sewing machines that operate manually provide clothing repair services in exchange for food, water, or other necessities. The repair and maintenance of existing clothing becomes more important than acquiring new garments when retail systems fail. The entertainment and recreation transformation occurs as television, internet, video games, and other electrical entertainment options disappear completely. Residents develop alternative recreational activities based on social interaction, physical activity, and creative expression that don't require electrical equipment. Card games, board games, storytelling, music, and conversation become primary entertainment forms during long evenings without electric lighting. Street musicians and performers find audiences eager for entertainment when electronic media becomes unavailable. Acoustic music performances, theatrical presentations, and storytelling events provide community entertainment that brings people together during social isolation. These performances become social gatherings that maintain community morale and cultural expression during the crisis. Reading becomes a popular activity as people rediscover books when electronic entertainment disappears, but the lack of electric lighting limits reading to daylight hours and candlelight periods. Community reading groups share books and discuss literature as social activities that provide intellectual stimulation and human connection. Libraries that remain open during daylight hours become community centers where people gather to read, study, and socialize. The economic innovation begins as residents develop alternative trading systems and cooperative arrangements that enable commerce when traditional monetary systems cannot operate effectively. Barter networks emerge where people exchange goods and services without using money that has limited value when electronic payment systems fail. These trading systems recreate some economic activity while adapting to conditions where normal commercial infrastructure doesn't function. Time banks develop where residents trade labor and services using time-based accounting systems that track contributions and needs without requiring monetary transactions. A person might provide childcare services in exchange for meals, or offer construction work in return for housing assistance. These cooperative economic arrangements enable community members to meet their needs through mutual aid rather than traditional employment and commerce. The informal economy expands rapidly as people offer services like food preparation, childcare, security, maintenance, and other necessities in exchange for goods and services they need. Former professionals apply their skills to community needs when their normal employment becomes impossible. Teachers provide tutoring in exchange for food. Engineers organize construction projects for housing improvements. Medical professionals offer healthcare services for community support. The security situation stabilizes in some areas and deteriorates in others depending on community organization and resource availability. Neighborhoods that develop effective cooperation and resource sharing maintain safety through collective action and mutual aid. Areas that experience resource competition and social breakdown see increased crime and violence as desperate residents compete for scarce necessities. Community policing emerges as neighborhood groups organize security patrols and conflict resolution systems when official police services become limited. These volunteer security efforts focus on protecting vulnerable residents, preventing crime, and mediating disputes that arise from resource competition and stress. The community policing systems work effectively in areas with strong social cooperation but cannot function in neighborhoods with significant social divisions. The 21st day marks a turning point as communities that successfully organize cooperative systems begin developing sustainable routines for long-term survival without electrical infrastructure. These communities achieve stability in food production, water management, sanitation, security, and social organization that enables them to maintain reasonable quality of life despite ongoing power failure. The success of these communities demonstrates human adaptability and social cooperation capabilities. The psychological transformation continues as residents develop new relationships with technology, community, and survival that fundamentally change their perspectives on urban life and modern convenience. People who successfully adapt to post-electrical living report greater appreciation for community relationships, practical skills, and simple pleasures that don't depend on technological complexity. The crisis reveals human capabilities for adaptation and cooperation that urban life rarely requires. However, communities that cannot achieve effective organization continue struggling with resource shortages, social conflict, and deteriorating living conditions. The contrast between successful and failing communities becomes stark as cooperative areas develop abundance while divided areas experience ongoing poverty and hardship. The differences demonstrate that survival during extended infrastructure failure depends more on social organization than individual resources or preparation. The health impacts vary dramatically depending on community organization and individual circumstances. Areas with effective water management, sanitation systems, and food distribution maintain relatively good health outcomes despite challenging conditions. Communities that cannot organize these basic services experience disease outbreaks, malnutrition, and preventable deaths that result from infrastructure breakdown rather than unavoidable medical conditions. Maternal and child health become particular concerns as pregnancy, childbirth, and childcare require resources and support that may not be available when medical systems fail. Community midwives and experienced parents provide childbirth assistance when hospital services become unavailable. Childcare cooperatives ensure that children receive nutrition, education, and supervision when parents must focus on survival activities. The elderly and disabled populations experience varied outcomes depending on community support systems and individual capabilities. Areas that develop effective care networks for vulnerable residents maintain better outcomes than communities that cannot organize assistance for people with special needs. The crisis reveals both community capacity for caring for vulnerable members and the challenges of providing adequate support without institutional resources. The 30th day arrives with New York City transformed into a collection of diverse communities that have adapted to extended power failure through different strategies and achieved varying levels of success in maintaining livable conditions. Some neighborhoods have created sustainable cooperative systems that provide security, food, water, and social connection for their residents. Others continue struggling with resource shortages and social breakdown that make daily survival difficult and uncertain. The electricity returns suddenly on the morning of the 31st day, just as mysteriously as it disappeared a month earlier. Street lights illuminate avenues that had been dark for 30 days. Traffic signals begin their familiar patterns of red, yellow, and green. Air conditioning units restart with mechanical hums that sound strange after weeks of silence. Cell phone towers begin broadcasting signals that reconnect millions of residents with communication networks they had learned to live without. The restoration process proves complex and gradual as electrical systems that had been shut down for 30 days require careful restart procedures to prevent damage and ensure safe operation. Utility workers coordinate the systematic restoration of power to critical infrastructure before residential areas receive electricity. Hospitals, emergency services, and water treatment facilities receive priority connections while residential neighborhoods wait for their turn in the restoration sequence. The psychological impact of power restoration creates mixed emotions among residents who had adapted to post-electrical living. Relief and gratitude combine with anxiety about returning to technological dependence that proved fragile during the crisis. Some residents express reluctance to abandon the community cooperation and simple living patterns they developed during the blackout. Others eagerly embrace the return of modern conveniences they had desperately missed. The social transformation proves permanent for many residents who maintain the community relationships and cooperative practices they developed during the crisis. Neighborhood mutual aid networks continue operating alongside restored commercial systems. Community gardens and food production efforts expand rather than disappear. Residents who discovered skills and interests during the blackout continue developing these capabilities despite the return of electrical alternatives. The economic changes persist as some residents embrace barter systems and cooperative economics that proved effective during the crisis. Local trading networks continue operating alongside restored monetary systems. Community resource sharing arrangements remain active as residents recognize the benefits of cooperation and mutual aid that extend beyond emergency situations. Small businesses that adapted to non-electrical operations maintain some of these practices for their resilience benefits. The infrastructure discussions begin immediately as city officials, residents, and experts analyze what happened and how to prevent similar failures in the future. The 30-day blackout revealed both the vulnerability of modern urban systems to electrical failure and the human capacity for adaptation and cooperation when technological infrastructure fails. These lessons influence planning for future emergencies and discussions about urban resilience. The technology relationship changes permanently for many residents who experienced life without electrical devices and connectivity. Some people reduce their dependence on electronic entertainment and social media in favor of direct human interaction and non-electrical activities they discovered during the blackout. Others develop backup systems and alternative approaches for essential activities that proved vulnerable to power failure. The community bonds forged during the crisis continue strengthening as neighbors who cooperated for survival maintain their relationships and mutual support systems. Apartment buildings develop permanent systems for sharing resources and coordinating community activities. Neighborhoods organize ongoing programs for emergency preparedness, resource sharing, and collective action that build on relationships formed during the blackout. The second week brings the emergence of complex social hierarchies and leadership structures as communities organize themselves for extended survival without electrical infrastructure. Natural leaders emerge from unexpected backgrounds as people with practical skills, organizational abilities, and calm temperament assume responsibility for community coordination. Former corporate executives find themselves following the guidance of maintenance workers who understand building systems, retired teachers who can organize group activities, and military veterans who know how to maintain discipline and morale during challenging circumstances. Leadership conflicts arise in some communities as different people compete for authority over resource distribution and decision-making. These power struggles can destroy community cooperation when they become personal conflicts rather than discussions about effective organization. Successful communities develop democratic decision-making processes that prevent individual authoritarianism while enabling decisive action when circumstances require quick responses to emergencies or opportunities. The gender dynamics shift significantly as traditional employment roles become irrelevant and survival depends on practical skills, physical capability, and social cooperation rather than professional credentials or economic status. Women often assume leadership roles in community organization, childcare coordination, and resource management because these responsibilities require skills that many women develop through family management and social networking experiences. Men gravitate toward physical labor, security responsibilities, and technical problem-solving that utilize their physical strength and mechanical knowledge. However, the breakdown of traditional gender expectations creates opportunities for people to develop capabilities they might not have explored under normal social conditions. Some men discover talents for childcare, cooking, and social mediation while some women develop skills in construction, security, and technical repair work. The age-related dynamics prove complex as different generations contribute various capabilities to community survival. Elderly residents possess knowledge about pre-electrical living, traditional crafts, and community organization that becomes invaluable during the crisis. Many seniors remember childhoods before widespread electrical appliances and can teach younger people about food preservation, manual crafts, and social activities that don't require electronic entertainment. Young adults provide physical energy and technological creativity that helps communities adapt electronic devices to non-electrical uses and develop innovative solutions to infrastructure problems. Teenagers adapt quickly to physical labor and often serve as messengers and scouts who travel between communities to coordinate information and resource sharing. Children demonstrate remarkable resilience and creativity in adapting to play and learning activities that don't depend on electronic toys and educational technology. Middle-aged adults serve as bridges between generations while contributing professional skills and life experience to community problem-solving. Parents take responsibility for maintaining family stability while participating in community organization. Their combination of maturity and physical capability makes them essential for coordinating complex community projects and maintaining long-term planning perspectives. The cultural transformation accelerates as communities develop new traditions, rituals, and social practices that provide meaning and connection during circumstances that challenge individual identity and social stability. Evening gatherings around candles or fires become regular community events where people share stories, music, and conversation that replaces television and internet entertainment. These social rituals help maintain mental health and community bonds during extended isolation from broader social networks. Storytelling traditions emerge as people rediscover the entertainment and educational value of oral narrative. Residents with theatrical experience organize performance events that provide community entertainment while preserving cultural knowledge and moral teachings. These storytelling sessions become intergenerational activities where older residents share historical knowledge and life experiences while younger people contribute contemporary perspectives and creative interpretations. Music becomes central to community life as people organize singing groups, acoustic instrument performances, and rhythmic activities that provide entertainment and emotional expression without requiring electrical amplification. Former musicians find audiences eager for live performances that create shared cultural experiences during social isolation. Community singing becomes therapeutic activity that reduces stress and strengthens social bonds through coordinated artistic expression. The artistic renaissance flourishes as people develop creative projects using available materials and rediscover the satisfaction of handmade artistic expression. Visual arts expand beyond professional galleries to community spaces where people create paintings, sculptures, and crafts using improvised materials and tools. These artistic activities provide psychological relief and creative outlet during circumstances that otherwise focus primarily on survival necessities. Religious and spiritual practices adapt to candlelight worship and meditation activities that provide comfort and meaning during existential challenges created by infrastructure collapse. Faith communities become support networks that help people find purpose and hope when material circumstances seem desperate. Prayer groups, meditation circles, and religious study sessions provide psychological stability and social connection that help maintain mental health during extended crisis. The philosophical discussions emerge as people question fundamental assumptions about technology dependence, social organization, and human purpose when modern conveniences disappear and community cooperation becomes essential for survival. These conversations help residents process the psychological impact of losing lifestyle patterns they previously considered essential for happiness and success. Some people discover that simpler living provides satisfaction and meaning they didn't experience during technologically dependent lifestyles. The learning acceleration occurs as people develop new skills and knowledge that enable survival and contribution to community welfare. Adults learn practical capabilities like food preservation, water purification, basic construction, and manual crafts that seemed obsolete before the crisis but prove essential for post-electrical living. The intensive skill development creates learning communities where people teach each other capabilities that enable individual and collective survival. Traditional craft knowledge becomes valuable as people rediscover the utility and satisfaction of making useful objects by hand. Woodworking, metalworking, textile production, and pottery provide both practical necessities and creative satisfaction. Residents with these skills become teachers and resource people who help others develop capabilities for creating tools, containers, clothing, and household items that cannot be obtained through commercial retail when electronic commerce fails. The food culture transformation continues evolving as communities develop sophisticated approaches to food production, preservation, and preparation that provide nutrition and culinary satisfaction despite the loss of electrical appliances and commercial food distribution. Community cooking becomes social activity that brings people together while efficiently preparing meals using limited fuel and ingredients. Shared meals become important social rituals that maintain community bonds and cultural practices. Foraging knowledge expands as residents learn to identify and utilize wild plants, insects, and other natural food sources available in urban environments. Parks, vacant lots, and landscaped areas become sources of supplemental nutrition when people learn which plants are edible and how to prepare them safely. This foraging activity connects urban residents with natural food systems they had never previously needed to understand or utilize. Food preservation techniques become essential skills as communities learn to maintain food supplies without refrigeration and electrical preservation methods. Smoking, salting, drying, and fermentation provide methods for preserving meat, vegetables, and other perishables that would otherwise spoil quickly in warm weather. These preservation methods require knowledge and equipment that residents must develop or construct using available materials and community cooperation. The brewing and fermentation culture emerges as communities discover that alcoholic beverages provide nutrition, medicine, and social lubrication that help maintain morale during difficult circumstances. Home brewing using available fruits and grains becomes both practical activity and social hobby that provides beverages with caloric and psychological benefits. The fermentation knowledge also applies to food preservation and preparation of fermented foods that improve nutrition and digestibility. The construction and repair renaissance occurs as residents learn to maintain and improve their living spaces using manual tools and available materials when professional construction services become unavailable. Building maintenance becomes community responsibility as residents organize cooperative work parties for roof repairs, plumbing maintenance, and structural improvements that keep housing habitable without professional contractors and electrical tools. The tool-sharing networks develop as communities recognize that manual tools become essential for construction, repair, and manufacturing activities, but individual tool ownership becomes inefficient when resources are scarce. Community tool libraries enable residents to access specialized equipment for specific projects while sharing the costs and maintenance responsibilities among multiple users. These sharing systems prevent duplication while ensuring that necessary tools remain available for community use. Salvage and recycling operations become sophisticated systems for recovering useful materials from abandoned or damaged buildings and converting waste products into useful tools, building materials, and household necessities. Residents develop expertise in identifying valuable materials and processing them for reuse in construction and manufacturing projects. These salvage activities provide both essential materials and productive work that contributes to community welfare. The transportation innovation continues developing as communities create human-powered and alternative energy transportation systems that enable movement and commerce when electrical transportation fails. Bicycle manufacturing and repair become essential services as communities develop capabilities for maintaining and improving human-powered transportation. Cart and wagon construction provides methods for transporting heavy materials and supplies over longer distances than individual carrying capacity allows. Boat building and water transportation develop in waterfront communities that have access to rivers and harbor areas. Small boats and rafts provide transportation options that avoid congested streets while enabling fishing, trading, and communication between communities separated by water. These water transportation systems become particularly important for communities located on islands or peninsular areas that become isolated when bridge and tunnel electrical systems fail. The messenger and communication networks expand as communities develop systematic approaches to maintaining contact and coordinating activities across geographic distances when electronic communication remains impossible. Runners and cyclists provide message delivery services that connect separated communities and enable coordination of trade, assistance, and information sharing. These communication networks become essential infrastructure for maintaining regional cooperation and mutual aid. Signal systems using flags, mirrors, and other visual communication methods provide rapid communication across short distances during daylight hours. Communities located on high buildings or hills develop signal stations that can relay messages between distant locations more quickly than messenger travel. These visual communication systems require coordination and standardization but provide effective alternatives to electronic communication when properly organized. The medical system continues evolving as healthcare providers develop comprehensive approaches to maintaining community health without electrical medical equipment and pharmaceutical supply chains. Community health programs focus on prevention, basic treatment, and traditional healing methods that can function effectively with limited resources and technology. Medical knowledge sharing becomes essential as healthcare providers teach community members basic medical skills and health maintenance practices. Pharmacy alternatives emerge as communities learn to identify, cultivate, and prepare medicinal plants that can provide treatment for common health problems when commercial medications become unavailable. Herbal medicine knowledge becomes valuable as people learn which wild and cultivated plants have therapeutic properties and how to prepare them safely and effectively. This botanical medicine provides alternatives to manufactured pharmaceuticals that may not be available during extended infrastructure failure. Medical equipment innovation develops as communities create simple medical devices and treatment tools using available materials and manual construction techniques. Splints, bandages, surgical instruments, and diagnostic equipment can be constructed or adapted from household materials when commercial medical supplies become unavailable. These improvised medical tools provide essential healthcare capabilities when sophisticated medical technology cannot function without electrical power. The mental health support systems become sophisticated as communities recognize that psychological well-being requires systematic attention and care when people face the trauma and stress of infrastructure collapse and social disruption. Peer counseling networks provide mutual support and therapeutic conversation that help residents process anxiety, depression, and trauma related to the crisis. These support systems utilize community knowledge and empathy rather than professional psychological services that may not be available. Conflict resolution systems develop as communities learn to mediate disputes and prevent violence when stress, resource competition, and social disruption create interpersonal tensions that could destroy community cooperation. Mediation training and peacekeeping practices help residents address conflicts constructively before they escalate into violence or permanent social divisions. These conflict resolution systems become essential for maintaining community harmony during circumstances that create numerous sources of tension and disagreement. The education system transformation continues as communities develop comprehensive learning programs that prepare children and adults for post-electrical living while maintaining academic knowledge and intellectual development. Schools without buildings become learning communities where education occurs through practical projects, community service, and mentorship relationships that integrate academic learning with survival skills and community contribution. Literacy and numeracy instruction continue using traditional teaching methods that don't require electrical equipment or standardized curricula. Reading instruction utilizes available books and written materials while mathematics education focuses on practical applications like resource calculation, construction measurement, and trade accounting. These basic academic skills remain important for individual development and community functioning even when high-technology education becomes impossible. Science education adapts to hands-on experimentation and observation using simple equipment and natural phenomena that demonstrate scientific principles without requiring electrical laboratory equipment. Chemistry, physics, and biology concepts can be taught through practical experiments using household materials and direct observation of natural processes. This experiential science education provides both academic knowledge and practical skills for understanding and manipulating physical processes. History and social studies education becomes community-based learning about local history, community organization, and social cooperation that help students understand how human societies function and develop. These social science subjects provide context for understanding current circumstances while teaching civic knowledge and social skills that prepare students for active participation in community decision-making and cooperation. The economic system innovations continue developing as communities create sophisticated trading networks and resource-sharing arrangements that provide security and prosperity without dependence on electrical infrastructure or traditional monetary systems. Credit and accounting systems develop using manual record-keeping that tracks contributions and consumption across complex trading relationships. These economic systems enable long-term planning and investment without requiring currency or electronic financial infrastructure. Labor organization systems emerge as communities coordinate work projects and job assignments that utilize individual skills and interests while ensuring that essential community work gets completed effectively. Work-sharing arrangements prevent individual burnout while ensuring that everyone contributes fairly to community welfare according to their capabilities and circumstances. These labor systems provide both individual satisfaction and collective productivity. Resource management systems become sophisticated as communities develop systematic approaches to allocation, conservation, and distribution of essential materials like food, water, fuel, and building materials. Inventory tracking and rationing systems ensure fair distribution while preventing waste and hoarding that could threaten community survival. These management systems require community coordination and individual responsibility but provide security and sustainability for long-term community survival. The technological innovation continues as communities develop creative applications of mechanical and manual technologies that provide functionality and convenience without electrical dependence. Mechanical devices, hand tools, and manual processes can perform many functions that people associate with electrical equipment when properly designed and constructed. These appropriate technology solutions provide modern functionality using sustainable and reparable mechanical systems. The cultural documentation begins as communities recognize the importance of recording their experiences, innovations, and social developments for future reference and historical preservation. Written records, drawings, and oral traditions preserve knowledge about successful survival strategies, community organization methods, and technological innovations that could benefit other communities or provide guidance for future emergencies. This documentation activity ensures that valuable knowledge developed during the crisis doesn't disappear when normal conditions return. The weather challenges intensify throughout the 30-day period as residents must cope with temperature extremes, precipitation, and seasonal weather conditions without electrical climate control systems. Summer heat becomes dangerous when air conditioning fails and buildings trap hot air without ventilation systems. Elderly residents and people with health conditions face serious risks from heat exhaustion and dehydration when they cannot cool their living spaces or obtain adequate fluids. Winter conditions prove equally challenging as heating systems fail and residents must maintain warmth using manual heating methods like fires, candles, and shared body heat. Apartment buildings lose their heating infrastructure while residents lack adequate fuel supplies for maintaining fires safely in spaces not designed for combustion heating. The combination of cold temperatures and limited heating options creates hypothermia risks for vulnerable populations. Rain and storm events become major challenges when buildings lose their electrical drainage pumps and weather protection systems. Flooded basements cannot be pumped dry without electrical equipment. Roof leaks become serious problems when water damage cannot be prevented using electrical fans and dehumidifiers. Storm cleanup requires manual labor and cooperation when electrical tools and equipment cannot assist with debris removal and damage repair. Wind damage during storms proves particularly problematic as fallen trees and debris cannot be removed using electrical saws and machinery. Communities must organize manual cleanup efforts using hand tools and human labor to clear streets and repair damage caused by severe weather events. These weather-related challenges compound the other difficulties of surviving without electrical infrastructure and require additional community organization and resource allocation. The seasonal food challenges become apparent as communities realize that food production and preservation must adapt to natural seasonal cycles without electrical systems for extending growing seasons or preserving harvests. Spring planting requires manual cultivation and irrigation systems that function without electrical pumps and equipment. Summer growing seasons demand intensive manual labor for weeding, watering, and pest control without mechanical assistance. Fall harvest activities require community coordination for gathering crops and processing them for preservation without electrical equipment. Apple pressing, grain threshing, and vegetable processing become community projects that require manual labor and traditional techniques. Winter food storage depends on root cellars, cold storage areas, and preservation methods that function without refrigeration while maintaining food safety and nutritional value. The waste management crisis deepens as communities struggle with garbage disposal and recycling when municipal services cannot operate and waste accumulation threatens public health. Organic waste management through composting becomes essential for preventing disease and odors while creating soil amendments for food production. Human waste disposal requires alternative systems when sewage treatment plants cannot function and building plumbing systems fail. Recycling and reuse systems become comprehensive community programs as residents recognize that waste materials represent valuable resources that cannot be replaced through normal commercial supply chains. Metal, wood, fabric, and other materials must be recovered and processed for reuse when new materials cannot be obtained through retail purchases. These waste management systems require community organization and individual responsibility for sorting, processing, and redistributing recovered materials. The clothing and textile production develops into sophisticated community industries as residents learn to create, repair, and maintain clothing and household textiles without access to commercial retail and industrial production. Spinning and weaving using manual equipment provide methods for creating fabric from raw materials like wool, cotton, and plant fibers. Sewing cooperatives organize clothing production and repair services that keep residents properly clothed despite the breakdown of commercial clothing distribution. Leather working and hide processing become valuable skills as communities learn to utilize animal skins for creating shoes, bags, and other essential items. Tanning and leather preparation require knowledge and equipment that communities must develop cooperatively. These traditional craft skills provide both practical necessities and productive work that contributes to community welfare while maintaining individual skills and satisfaction. The fuel and energy innovation continues expanding as communities develop comprehensive systems for obtaining and utilizing energy sources that don't depend on electrical infrastructure or commercial fuel distribution. Wood collection and processing provide fuel for heating and cooking when residents can access forest areas or urban trees. Charcoal production using traditional methods creates concentrated fuel that burns efficiently and provides high heat for cooking and metalworking. Solar energy collection using simple devices like solar ovens, water heaters, and crop dryers provides renewable energy applications that function without electrical systems. These solar technologies utilize direct sunlight for practical applications while requiring construction skills and materials that communities can obtain and maintain independently. Wind energy applications like windmills for grain grinding and water pumping provide mechanical power for essential community activities. Biogas production using organic waste materials provides fuel for cooking and lighting when communities can construct and maintain digester systems. These biological energy systems convert food scraps, animal waste, and other organic materials into methane gas that burns cleanly for household and community energy needs. The biogas systems require technical knowledge and maintenance but provide renewable energy sources that utilize waste materials productively. The water management systems become increasingly sophisticated as communities develop comprehensive approaches to water collection, purification, treatment, and distribution that provide safe drinking water and sanitation services without electrical infrastructure. Rainwater collection systems using gutters, barrels, and storage containers capture precipitation for household and community use. These collection systems require construction and maintenance skills but provide renewable water sources during dry periods. Well digging and groundwater access provide alternative water sources when municipal systems fail and surface water becomes contaminated or unavailable. Hand pumps and manual water lifting systems enable access to groundwater without electrical pumps. These water systems require community coordination for construction and maintenance but provide reliable water sources that function independently of electrical infrastructure. Water purification using filtration, boiling, and chemical treatment methods ensures safe drinking water when commercial water treatment plants cannot operate. Sand filters, charcoal purification, and solar disinfection provide methods for removing contaminants and pathogens from water sources. These purification systems require knowledge and equipment but enable communities to utilize available water sources safely for drinking and cooking. The transportation networks develop into comprehensive systems for moving people and goods throughout the metropolitan area when electrical transportation systems fail completely. Bicycle manufacturing and repair become essential community services as human-powered transportation proves most practical for individual mobility. Communities organize bicycle sharing programs and repair cooperatives that maintain transportation equipment cooperatively. Cart and wagon construction provides methods for transporting heavy materials and supplies over longer distances than individual carrying capacity allows. These human-powered freight systems enable trade and resource sharing between communities while utilizing available materials and construction skills. Horse-drawn transportation becomes valuable where animals are available and feed can be obtained for maintaining working animals. Boat transportation develops along waterfront areas where communities have access to rivers and harbor areas for water-based travel and trade. Small boat construction and repair provide alternatives to land transportation while enabling fishing and trading activities. These water transportation systems require maritime skills and equipment but provide access to resources and communities that become isolated by land transportation failures. The communication and information systems develop into sophisticated networks for coordinating activities and sharing knowledge across geographic distances when electronic communication remains impossible. Messenger services using runners and cyclists provide systematic message delivery between communities and organizations. These communication networks require organization and coordination but enable planning and cooperation across wider areas than individual communities can manage alone. Printing and document production using manual equipment provide methods for creating written materials for education, coordination, and information sharing. Hand printing, copying, and bookbinding enable communities to produce educational materials, technical manuals, and communication documents that preserve and share knowledge. These document production systems require skills and equipment but provide essential information infrastructure for community organization and education. Library and information services adapt to manual systems for organizing and accessing knowledge resources that communities need for problem solving and skill development. Book preservation and manual cataloging systems maintain access to information resources when electronic databases and internet access become unavailable. These information systems require volunteer labor and organization but provide essential knowledge resources for community development and education. The security and defense systems evolve into community-based protection that maintains safety and order when official law enforcement becomes limited or unavailable. Community watch organizations provide security patrols and crime prevention through cooperative vigilance and mutual protection. These security systems require community coordination and individual participation but provide safety and order when official protective services cannot function effectively. Conflict resolution and justice systems develop as communities learn to address disputes and criminal behavior when official court systems and police services become unavailable. Mediation and arbitration processes provide alternatives to formal legal systems while maintaining fairness and community standards. These justice systems require community participation and leadership but provide essential social order and dispute resolution. Emergency response systems adapt to manual and community-based approaches for handling medical emergencies, fires, and other crisis situations when official emergency services cannot function effectively. Volunteer fire brigades and emergency medical teams provide crisis response using available equipment and community resources. These emergency systems require training and organization but provide essential safety services when professional emergency response becomes unavailable. The social welfare systems develop as communities recognize responsibility for caring for vulnerable residents who cannot provide for themselves during infrastructure failure. Community support networks provide assistance for elderly, disabled, and sick residents who require help with daily activities and resource access. These welfare systems require community resources and volunteer labor but ensure that vulnerable community members receive necessary care and support. Child welfare and family support services emerge as communities take collective responsibility for ensuring that children receive adequate care, education, and protection when family resources become insufficient or when parents cannot provide adequate support. Community childcare and educational programs ensure that children continue developing and learning despite infrastructure failures that disrupt normal family and educational systems. The innovation and invention acceleration occurs as communities develop creative solutions to practical problems using available materials and community skills. Mechanical devices, tools, and equipment can be constructed or adapted to perform functions that people associate with electrical equipment when properly designed and constructed. These technological innovations provide modern functionality using sustainable and reparable mechanical systems that communities can maintain independently. Manufacturing and production systems develop as communities create capabilities for producing essential goods and materials that cannot be obtained through commercial retail when supply chains fail. Small-scale manufacturing using manual tools and techniques provides methods for creating tools, containers, clothing, and household items that communities need for daily life and survival. These production systems require skills and equipment but provide essential goods while creating productive work for community members. The environmental restoration begins as communities recognize opportunities to improve local environmental conditions when industrial activity ceases and communities develop closer relationships with natural systems. Urban gardening and food production creates green spaces while providing essential nutrition. These environmental improvements provide both practical benefits and psychological satisfaction as communities reconnect with natural systems. Pollution reduction occurs naturally when electrical industrial activity ceases and transportation systems convert to human-powered alternatives. Air quality improves when power plants and vehicles stop operating. Water quality benefits when industrial discharge ceases and sewage treatment adapts to natural processing methods. These environmental improvements demonstrate the environmental costs of electrical industrial civilization while providing healthier living conditions during infrastructure failure. Wildlife habitat restoration occurs as communities develop closer relationships with local ecosystems and recognize the value of biodiversity for food production, natural resources, and environmental stability. Urban wildlife populations increase when hunting pressure decreases and habitat areas expand through reduced industrial activity. These ecological improvements provide both practical benefits and educational opportunities for community members learning to live more sustainably. New York City emerges from its 30-day darkness transformed but not broken, with 8 million residents who learned that human cooperation and adaptation can overcome the failure of technological systems that seemed essential for urban survival. The city that never sleeps had learned to function in darkness, and the experience changed forever how its residents understand community, technology, and the true foundations of urban life. The Great Blackout becomes a defining moment in New York City history, remembered not primarily for the hardship and challenge it created, but for the human resilience and community cooperation it revealed when technological civilization temporarily failed and residents discovered they could create security, prosperity, and meaning through working together rather than depending on electronic infrastructure that proved fragile when it mattered most. The 30 Days of Darkness taught 8 million people that human community and cooperation provide the true foundation for urban civilization, while electrical infrastructure represents only tools that can enhance human society but cannot replace the social bonds and mutual aid that enable people to survive and thrive together under any circumstances.